Yeah. We can edit later, and there is no problem. Yeah.
We are live now.
Okay. Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Gyanendra Gongal, Senior Public Officer, WHO Regional Office for Southeast Asia region. The United Nations General Assembly adopted Resolution 73/250 proclaiming World Food Safety Day. Starting in 2019, every June 7 is a time to celebrate World Food Safety Day. And it is an opportunity to strengthen efforts to ensure that the food we eat is safe. This year's theme is Food Standards Save Lives. Food standards are vital to facilitate fair and transparent international food trade and consumer health protection. The theme coincides with the 60th anniversary of Codex Alimentaris this year and encourages food safety advocates worldwide to focus on the importance of applying standards in every aspect of food production from the farm to the plate. Food and Agriculture Organization of United Nations, Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, and WHO Regional Office for Southeast Asia and the Western Pacific are organizing this webinar to observe World Food Safety Day 2023. The main objective of the webinar is to highlight the importance of food standards, guidelines, and code of practices along the food supply chain to ensure that food is safe and nutritious. We are pleased to inform you that 350 participants have registered, and this event will be live streaming so that more and more colleagues, they can watch. And there are a few housekeeping announcements. Videos and microphone off, please, when you are not using. This session is being recorded, and use the chat box to post comment and questions during the presentation. Now, I would like to request to Mr. Tom Highland, Secretary, Codex Alimentaris Commission, Rome, to deliver opening remarks. We have received pre-recorded remarks.
Hello everyone, I'm very happy to talk to you as you are celebrating the 5th World Food Safety Day. I remember when World Food Safety Day was still a dream, but we made it happen and now it's almost ready for primary school. There was also a time in the 1960s when Codex Alimentaris was a dream, and now it's clearly already 60 years old. Some have asked me if Codex is ready for retirement, and I think the answer is no. It will never be able to retire, and let me explain why. In honor of Codex' big birthday, the slogan for this year's World Food Safety Day is Food Standards Save Lives. You may think that a standard is a boring thing, some pages of text, badly written prose, or number. How could it be a superhero and save lives? I say standards save lives all the time, whether you know it or not. They are scientific saviors and have saved all of you if you ever entered a plane, a car, or have eaten something. Standards capture the best knowledge and experience that we have about a topic and help to keep us safe. And for food, that is the Codex Alimentarius. I've recently learned that in Asia, 60 is a big birthday. Indeed, Dasho in Mandarin or Hwangap in Korean, because in the past, you would have to be super lucky to make it to that day. Now, actually, humans do not have to be so lucky anymore because many people live healthy and happy in their 80s or later. And this is also because we have standards, and in particular, food safety standards. Science, knowledge, and experience develop, and so does Codex. New products appear, and so do new problems. There will always be need for new or updated standards to save lives. Just like Codex standards, and you will hear much more about this in the speech of my good friend, the former chairperson of the Codex Alimentaris Commission, Dabe. Over to you.
You're on mute.
Now I would like to introduce Mr. Sanjay Dave, who was 3 times chairperson of the Codex Alimentarius Commission. He is advisor to the Food Safety and Standard Authority of India. He has spent almost 37 years in agriculture, trade, and food safety, and he has been senior international expert to FAO, WHO, ITC, and IAEA. I would not hesitate to say he is encyclopedia of Codex. Now I would like to request Mr. Sanjay Dave to deliver a keynote presentation.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Dr. Gongal and Dr. Sridhar Dharmapuri for inviting me. And congratulations to all of you for organizing this webinar, I think, which is very topical, very important. And we celebrate the World Food Safety Day. And we also have the 60th anniversary of Codex this year. And congratulations to everyone once again. I have been invited to speak as a keynote speaker on the theme of food standards save lives. What I would like to highlight is they do save lives, and in this process, we need to strengthen the national food control system. Let me show you this iceberg. This iceberg, the idea to show you is that there is a water level, and at that water level, we have the Codex standards. The developed countries are above the sea level, and the developing countries are below the sea level. We have not made progress. Most developing countries have not made progress, and we need to upgrade our standards to the level of Codex in the minimum so that we are able to ensure the safety of the health of people. We do not import substandard food, and we have better nutrition. And in the process, we also have better trade. This was the idea. And if we are not able to have a better trade, what will happen? If exports decline and the imports increase, it is actually the domestic market that suffers. And when the domestic market suffers, this is actually what happens. And therefore, we need food standards. Hunger, poverty, wastage of food, less nutrition. We have less tourists. We have a negative trade balance. Substandard food enters into our country, which is very harmful for any country. So what we need to do is to first determine all these things. Do we want to prevent hunger and poverty, prevent wastage? Do we need better nutrition? Of course, our standard would be, our standard answer would be yes. We would certainly like to do that. And if that be so, what should a country do in this situation? What we need to do is to adopt a strategic approach. Did we notify a legislation? Did we set up the food regulatory body, which works with Codex, which works with the international community to save the health of people? Yes, many countries have done that, but some countries still need to do that. And therefore, we need to harmonize our standards with Codex. Have we done that? These are some of the questions that come to our mind. If we want safer food for our people, let us come to the level of that water, which I showed to you in the first photograph. We need to harmonize. Let us look at the regulatory connect. How are we connected to the SPS agreement? How are we connected to Codex as a national food control system? The SPS agreement gives us the right to protect the life and health of people and at the same time not create barriers to trade. And remember, we need to have science-based standards. This is the crux, sum and substance of the SPS agreement. What does Codex say? Codex also says the same thing. The mandate is to safety of the health of people and fair practices in the food trade and set science-based standards. Therefore, the national government should also adopt a similar approach. Are we doing that? We have to protect the health of people. We also want better trade, better market access, and we need to have science-based standards. We need to take this forward. And if we have to take this forward in a logical manner, we need to harmonize our standards with Codex because Codex follows that process. And if we are able to do that, not only that we will align with Codex, we will also align with the SPS agreement, which is our commitment to the WTO. So let me give you two examples, one of India and the other of Bangladesh. What did we do in India? Why did we migrate from the Prevention of Food Adulteration Act, PFA, to the new legislation, Food Safety and Standards Act 2006? What was the reason for that? We had multiple standards, multiple agencies implementing it. Left hand does not know what the right hand is doing. Enforcement was difficult. There were overlapping quality and safety standards, and the standards were so rigid that the industry was not able to modernize itself. What else? We needed to align with Codex for sure and be consistent with the SPS agreement. Bring in transparency and ease of business. And of course, the food safety was important for consumer health. And what used to happen was that substandard food was coming into our country. We did not want that to happen. We needed better market access. So we migrated from the earlier regime into a new regime. It was a great decision taken by the parliament to bring a big shift into the existing system. What did we do? How did we do that? We harmonized our standards with Codex. We looked at the existing standards and saw where we need to upgrade. There were several products for which we did not have standards, but there were Codex standards. There were several products for which we had our standards, but there were no Codex standards. We reviewed all the horizontal things like food additives, contaminants, microbiological contamination, aflatoxins, pesticide residues, residues of veterinary drugs, methods of analysis, and so many things. We had to align our standards with Codex for both vertical and horizontal areas. It was a big task. It was a collaborative work. In India, it was FSSAI. In Bangladesh, it was Bangladesh Food Safety Authority. Their experts, the industry contributed, government institutions, subject matter experts, academicians, students, individuals, even students, consumer organizations, and trade bodies. Everyone worked as a team. We set up several working groups. It was a collaborative work. It was highly cooperative. Everybody volunteered to contribute to the economy by contributing to the harmonization process. What did Bangladesh do? Bangladesh did exactly the same thing. The only difference is we did it in 2012, Bangladesh did it in 2022. And the example of Bangladesh was a unique example of public-private partnership across borders. Bangladesh Food Safety Authority had taken the initiative to recruit almost close to 100 food scientists, food technologists, microbiologists, nutritionists, and they all contributed. They were the member secretary of so many working groups. And from the Indian side, the Indian industry agreed to support Bangladesh Food Safety Authority by using the previous example of India and to help them upgrade their standards. To name a few in the alphabetical order, the companies that contributed from India: Abbott, Coca-Cola, Dabur, Herbalife, International Flavors and Fragrances, ITC Limited, Kellogg's, Maricold Limited, Mother Dairy, MTR Limited, National Dairy Development Board, Pepsi, Unilever, Venky's, Vimta Laboratories, and Zydus Wellness. And there were others who were working behind the scene. In India, when we did it, we had 76 working groups. Bangladesh did it with 27 working groups. There were several Indians who were a part of those working groups managed by the Bangladesh Food Safety Authority. A lot of credit goes to them, to the Bangladesh Food Safety Authority, for spearheading this work, mammoth task of aligning standards with Codex. In India, we took about 8 to 9 months because that was the first time we were experiencing it. Bangladesh did it in 4 months. And currently, they are in the process of notifying their draft standards to the WTO for comments. A lot of work went into it. And the advantage is that it will help to improve the safety of the health of people. So what next? Who is next? Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives, and others, one by one over the next few years. And I recommend FAO and WHO take a lead in this direction. This will help to improve food safety in the region, in the sub-region and the other regions, and reduce the annual disease burden on the government. Enhance safer food and better market access. This process that we followed in India and in Bangladesh can be followed in other countries and other regions as well. Food standards save lives. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll be happy to respond to questions. I'll stop sharing now. You are muted.
Yeah. Thank you, Sanjay Dave sir, for providing inspiring example of harmonization Codex standard across the border. And definitely there is discussion about the SPS also. And I just want to highlight that World Trade Organization has recognized Codex Alimentarius Commission as a standard setting organization. So there is a linkage between SPS and Codex standards. Food safety is a shared responsibility, and everyone involved in the food supply chain, from farmers and producers to retailer and consumers, has a role to play in ensuring safe food. And food standards that are science-based, evidence-based, and there are various scientific bodies such as Joint FAO-WHO Expert Committee on Food Additives, JEFCA, Joint FAO-WHO Expert Meeting on Microbiological Risk Assessment, JEMRA, Joint FAO-WHO Expert Meeting on Pesticide Residues. So these scientific bodies provide scientific advice to Codex to set food standards, which is acceptable universally. And that is very important to ensure fair practice in trade as well as consumer health protection. we just want to play two videos just to highlight the importance of this food safety as everyone business, and also how different discipline and scientific bodies, they can play important role in setting Codex standards. Thank you very much. Just to highlight that food safety is a shared responsibility, and we all have a role to play to make food safe. And food safety is based on science, and the Codex Alimentaris Commission, managed by FAO and WHO, establishes science-based food standards, guidelines, and code of practices that ensure food safety and quality. Now, we are moving to session 2. We have panel discussion to be moderated by Dr. Sridhar Dharampuri, who is Senior Food Safety and Nutrition Officer at FAO Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, Bangkok.
Thank you, Gyanendra, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this part of the webinar on food standards save lives. We have five very interesting panelists from whom we shall hear today. Before that, let me just also, on our behalf, thank Mr. Sanjay Dave for an excellent talk, and also tell him there are a couple of questions for him in the Q&A, so he may wish to answer it online as we go along. So today, ladies and gentlemen, we have got 5 panelists with whom we will talk about food standards, how they save lives, and what is the role that they perform in the food control system and guide us towards better trade and better health. So the first panelist is Ms. Tian Jing, who is the chairperson of the CC Asia, or the FAO WHO Coordinating Committee for Asia on Codex. She's also the Secretary General of the China National Codex Committee. And as you can see on the screen, she has an extensive CV in food safety and on research for Codex standards. So Thank you, Ms. Jing, for joining us today from China. Our next panelist is again a person who's familiar to almost everyone who's worked in Codex or is familiar with it. The former vice chairperson of the Codex Elementaris Commission, Dr. Pirviyatno Haryadi, also known as Pur to many of us. He is a professor in food processing engineering at the IPB University in Bogor, and is actively involved in many professional organizations. He has actually a PhD in food science, and as we said, his role in Codex is very well known by those who are in the field. Our third panelist is Atul Upadhyay, who is the president of the Nepal Food Scientists and Technology Association, or NEFOSTA. And this is an association which has been very active in promoting food safety standards in Nepal, and particularly among the industry. And he himself has been a member of the FAO and WHO Food Codex Committee on Nutrition. So he will be telling us about the role of the private sector, about food technology in general. Our next panelist is from Fiji. So thank you, first of all, Mr. Vimal Dev, for joining us, as it is already getting late, but he's joining us all the way from Fiji. And he's the Chief Health Inspector and the National Advisor on Environmental Health, Ministry of Health and Medical Services in Fiji. He's also a member of the National Codex Steering Committee and the Secretary of the Central Board of Health. So he will be telling us a lot about the perspective from the Pacific Islands, which have a very unique context, as all of us know. And last but not the least, our final panelist is Mr. Ruli Prayoga, who represents the civil society and in many ways also one of the very important components of the food chain, livestock. And he is a country strategy manager in Indonesia for Mercy for Animals. He is by background and experience a behavior change strategist. And that, as you would know, is very important in information, education, and communication activities when we talk about consumer awareness. And he has a master's in social marketing from the University of Kent in the UK. So thank you, dear panelists, for joining us today. And we look forward to hearing from you on many aspects of food standards that you deliver in your own role. So let me first start off with the question to Tian Jiang in China. So Ms. Jiang, as you have been the Secretary General of the National Codex Committee, you're also the coordinator for CC Asia. How do you see food standard setting and implementation in a big country? So please tell us about the experience. Over to you, Ms. Jiang.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. And I'm very honored to have this opportunity to attend the discussion today. I think it's an interesting question, and I would like to share our experience. As you mentioned, China is a very big country with a population of over 1.4 billion. And in China, the cousins and dietary patterns differ from region to region and influenced by the climate, soil, and water resource and traditions. So to conduct the food safety control, aiming at protecting the public health and promoting the food industry, we have built up a food safety regulatory framework. There are laws and legislations at the top level. For example, the food safety law. And under the laws and the legislations, there are three pillars. First is a risk assessment, which provides a scientific basis. And second is risk management and food standards, policies, regulations are risk management tools. And third is risk communication to all stakeholders. Findings in risk assessment motivate the developing or amending the risk management tools, and the effectiveness of risk communication will largely influence the implementation of risk management. So these three pillars are closely related to each other. Furthermore, I would like to emphasize the importance of Codex standards. Although the establishment of our national standards is based on the national risk assessment and is in line with the actual situation of China. We will also refer to Codex standards and suggestions of some results from FAO and WTO expert committee when establishing national standards. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Ting. So as we have seen, she has given us a very good perspective on how food standards are implemented in a big country with a big population. So when we are talking about standard setting, the reference always turns to Codex. So let's ask the Vice Chair, the former Vice Chair of the Codex Alimentarius Commission, if you could elaborate about the standard setting process at the global level, and what has been your experience as the Vice Chair? Over to you,
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, again, thank you very much for the invitation, for the opportunity to have a good discussion on this very important occasion. Before that, I would like to say good morning, good day, good evening to all. First, I think regarding the standard setting process in Codex in a global setting. First, it is important to emphasize that Codex is a member-driven organization, meaning that the work agenda of Codex is initiated and proposed by member. This especially also include when we're talking about the standard setting process itself. Okay? So in general, I think the process starts with the proposal coming from member country, and the proposal may also come from observer actually, but if it is coming from observer, the proposal need to be endorsed by the member country to start the process. So the proposal could be in the form of developing new standard, new guideline, or new code of practice, but also could be a proposal to revise it. So that's the kind of proposal that may come from a member country. And each member country basically has the same right to propose the standard development in Codex. So the proposal consists of a discussion paper outlining what the proposed standard is expected to achieve, and the proposal should be accompanied by the project document in explaining about the time frame basically for the completion of the work. The proposal can be submitted to and discussed at the appropriate committee. For example, if the proposal is concerned with the issues of contaminant, then it can be proposed and discussed in the contaminant committee and so on. So after the discussion, then the proposal will be forwarded to the Codex Executive Committee for review. Okay? So the Codex Executive Committee will review the proposal on technical and scientific aspect, on their potential impact on health of consumer, and also on fair practices in the food trade, as well as on their urgency and importance with regard to the Codex strategic plan. So if all those considerations are deemed justified, then the proposal will be brought to the Commission for the approval. If the CAC or the Commission approve, then that's basically the official start for the work. And that's usually called as the first step of standard setting process in Codex. So the first step is a long process. So this need to be understood and need to be prepared by any country who would like to propose for standard. The next is, standard elaboration, basically. So the standard elaboration start with the drafting standard. This is coordinated by the Codex Secretariat. And this is step 2. And then the draft is circulated to member government and the member country, observer, and also Codex committee to obtain a comment and suggestion. That's considered to be step 3. And then those comments will be used to revise or to improve the draft. That will be a step 4. And then finally, we will have a proposed draft standard to be discussed at the committee. That will be a step 5. Okay. If the step is still deemed necessary to for further elaboration, then it will proceed to another round of elaboration, which is a step 6 and 7, depending on the complexity of the proposed standard, until there is a consensus that all issues related to standard has been resolved. This process can take several years, unfortunately, because it involves a lot of member countries. And the approved standard is then reviewed by the executive committee and brought to the commission for adoption. That's step 8. So that's very much the general process, which is usually referred to the 8-step process in the Codex setting standard. After the adoption, the Codex standard will publish at the Codex website, and that considered to be adopted standard. So that's very much the general process, Dr. Dharma Puri, and hopefully will explain the process in general about how the setting standard in Codex proceed. Is that?
Yes, thank you for, I think we asked the right question to you. You have such a command on how this process unfolds. So thank you for explaining that in such a clear and simple way to everyone who's watching and listening. It is indeed a long and complex process, but it's important, and particularly because it's very participatory, and Codex provides a neutral platform where every country can put in its views and also back it up with data and evidence to show how a food standard needs to be shaped. So thank you for that great overview. So having talked about how these standards are actually set, let's hear from the role of academic and professional organizations. So I'd like to turn over the question to Atul Upadhyay in Nepal and of NEFOSTA. Can you tell us something about your role in formulating national food standards and its enforcement? Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dharma Puri. First of all, thanks, and Nepal Food Scientists and Technologists Association, NEFOSTA, is very thankful for this opportunity, precisely on the month where we are starting to celebrate the World Food Safety Day for 2023. Yes, I think academics, academias, and professional organizations do have very vital roles in formulating and then supporting the government to enforce the standards. Look, standards are based on evidences. They need data, and I think Dabe sir also clearly mentioned in his keynote address that it is based on science, robust science, right? And to develop the standards, we need data, and these data will be generated by academics, by researchers. So once they give the data to the relevant authorities who are responsible for making standards, these standards will then be formulated. And now there comes the role of professional bodies. Let me give an example what NEFOSTA, our organization, has been doing in this country, Nepal, for enforcement of the standards. I have 2 examples. Number 1 is the complementary food standard. Nepal did not have complementary food standard, but in 2018, NEFOSTA, our organization, organized a national food conference in which one of the resolutions said that we need the complementary food standards because these are being fed to the children. And so now we have, after 4 or 5 years, we have a complementary food standards. It was NEFOSTA which started to advocate the relevant authorities. The second example is how NEFOSTA is playing the roles is we are currently at the moment discussing with members of parliaments, the lawmakers, on the food safety bill that is in the lower house. And we have provided feedbacks, suggestions, and we're in continuous discussion with different political parties to get this to get this bill passed and endorsed as early as possible, so that we have a better food safety standards in the country and more robust and it's harmonized with Codex and all those things. So I think just to end up the whole thing is that professional bodies and academias, they have a very crucial roles. And I think in Nepal, in collaboration with the Food Safety Authority, which is Department of Food and Technology in Nepal, we are jointly working together. In fact, our office is within the premises of Department of Food. So we are jointly working together and continuously advocating, continuously providing support, feedbacks to the lawmakers and providing support to the law implementers. So this is how both academias and the professional bodies can work, and their necessity in the formulation and enforcement of the standard. Over to you, Dr. Dharma Puri. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Upadhyay. And that's a very important message that you've given to all our viewers and listeners. The role of professional and academic organizations, and I think it's music to all our ears about when we hear that you are trying to convince all the lawmakers and policymakers to revise the legislation and to modernize it. I think it's an important part to play, and a message to everybody that the more we propagate this and we advocate revision of legislations and upgrading them, the safer the pathway to making our food, to increase food safety. So from Nepal, let's travel all the way down to the Pacific, to Fiji, and to Mr. Vimal Dev. Mr. Dev, can you tell us something about the role of the National Codex Committee in Fiji and Fiji's perspective of Codex standards and in its development for consumer health and trade? Over to you, Mr. Vimal Dev.
Thank you so much. First of all, let me say congratulations to the 60th anniversary for the Codex to be in existence. Also, thank you so much for allowing a small island development state to actually be part of the panel to give our viewpoints around standards, and particularly food standards, and ensuring that that food standards actually saves lives. Fiji has been part of the Codex Commission for around 38 years. And I think one of the things that I must reflect on is that being a small island nation, much of our produce the food that we consume are processed items. And I resonate to the keynote address by Mr. Sanjay resonates well with us in terms of what is said about the processed foods, around what is the expectation around compliance, around standards. And one of the things to probably reflect on is how do we actually translate standards that are done globally into the local context. So of course, being a member of the Codex Committee and actually sharing the Ministry of Health perspective and being the custodians of the Domestic Food Safety Act and regulations, we play an important role in advising and debating and discussing the importance of particular food-related standards that needs to actually be enforced. And one of the things that we continue to invest on is consumer education, for one, and consumer awareness. And this is first and foremost because we deal with a lot of imported food items. And on the reverse, I must say that it's also looking at compliance to certain standards. So one of the important things to reflect on is when standards are developed, there has to be a mechanism to actually look at whether these standards are in fact adhered to. Is there some way to measure or to have a monitoring and evaluation system? So this is where the Ministry of Health comes in, and we have a few other agencies that actually play a role. And I was reflecting, I put a few notes in, and I was reflecting on what Mr. Sanjay had actually presented on, and looking at where India is and how the Bangladesh and India examples are given, and what we aspire to do for Fiji context. Just very quickly touching on the local standard issues. One of the beauties of drafting a legislation or looking at drafting a legislation and changes on our food safety was that we could easily look at what has worked well in other countries. So for Fiji context, we in fact reviewed our food safety laws back in 2003. And one of the clauses that was introduced into our law was making sure that the Codex and its standards are applied to any products. If in doubt, that's how we actually say within our food circles, if in doubt, reflect and look at the Codex. But of course, our law is also protective of our sovereignty, and it makes it clear that if there is a conflict of any local standards, then the local standards would be prevailing. And just to reflect on our legislation itself, we have around 18 specific standards that we developed locally and developed for Fiji context. And we also look at standards around certain things on industry standards around food, and particularly a island population surrounded by oceans. We are particularly so concerned, and what's important to us is the fish and fisheries industry and making sure that the standards are applied equally in there. So it's a bit of both with what Dr. Gyanan had said around farm to fork, and also we look at the reef to ridge approach around our standards. So, and applying these equally important. I must also reflect around the importance of compliance and probably give an example, a not so happy story, but we came out of it this. Fiji, in fact, has a good market in the European Union in terms of its fish and fisheries products. And we aspire to meet overseas market standards and requirements. And this is, again, talking about standards. Unfortunately, a few years back, Fiji was actually blacklisted because of failure to meet or to show our ability to meet the stringent standards to the European countries. Fiji worked hard. It was not just Ministry of Health, various agencies worked hard as a whole of government, and we got ourselves listed back onto that market. And it was not just about meeting the standards, it's a trade, it's food safety and standards. So with that example, I just wanted to reflect the importance that standards play and the importance around making sure that we not just write something, but also to monitor, to look at compliance, and to also live and breathe these things. And the last one I wanted to say is that no, standards will definitely not retire. We continue to build up on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Valdev. I think that was a great example of how even relatively small countries rise up to the challenge by using food standards as an effective instrument. And you said very rightly that as island countries which are import dependent, import controls, and therefore food standards are very important, both for safety as well as public health. And at the same time, these standards offer you a way to rectify any issues that you might have both during in trade as well as in public health. So that's the importance of standards in our daily life and in the economy of any country. And you can see that this actually plays a significant role, particularly for small island developing states. So thank you for bringing that to light for the benefit of all our audiences. We then move on now to one of the pillars of food safety, and that's civil society. Food safety, as we know, it needs to be addressed by the government, by the private sector, and the civil society. So we have Mr. Ruli Prayoga, who will represent the viewpoint of the civil society, and he also comes from one of the key sectors that is part of the food chain, and that is livestock. So, Mr. Prayoga, can you first tell us about the work that you do? You're a strong advocate of farm animal welfare. How does that actually influence food safety, and what role does it play? Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Dharma. First of all, I would like to congratulate Codex for the 50 years anniversary, and then I'm really feeling honored being here. And actually, I'm representing the Indonesian Consumers Foundation, YLKI, and for us, consumers is really ultimate beneficiaries for the food safety for sure. And related to your questions is how the animal welfare is really connecting with food safety. That first of all, that we have to really consider that healthy animal will be lead to the healthy food. So we have to ensure the animal is really free from the fear, free from the stress, and then also this will be lead to the better farm management and leads to the better quality of the food itself. One thing that I want to share that while KAI in Indonesia has also really focused on these food safety issues in the livestock. So we have research on the antimicrobial resistance contamination in the broiler. So we just found a shocking key finding that our broiler is already contaminated with superbugs, almost 3 antibiotics being resistant. So that's really concerning us. And also, we also have a focus on the sugar in the soft drink issues, which is leads to the number of the diabetes disease in Indonesia, and also surprisingly that the diabetes disease is also affect to the children. So talking about the food safety and animal welfare, that's really clearly that through the animal welfare we already have a standard. So if we uphold the animal welfare standard, so we can lead to better food standard. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Dharmapuri.
Thank you, Ruli. I think he's highlighted a very important part. Livestock and as well as livestock-based products are an important part of our diet now, and particularly in the Asian region, which has been growing rapidly over the last few decades. The consumption of animal protein has increased in leaps and bounds, and therefore what animals eat or what animals are treated with has an important implication for food safety in terms of human consumption. So that's a point that he has highlighted, and a point that all of us who are listening can actually then take note of. So we'll now go back to Jiangting in China, and we'd like to ask her again now about her role as the coordinator of CC Asia, which is the FAO-WHO Codex Committee for the Asian region. So what role does the committee play in global and regional food standard settings? Over to you.
And thank you for asking. And I believe that CC Asia is playing a very important role in global and regional food standard setting. As you know, several countries are hosting important Codex committees in our region, such as India is hosting CCSH species, Malaysia is having the CCFO, and China is chairing food additives and pesticide. Republic of Korea are hosting AMR, and these countries are trying to contribute to the Codex work. And I think as the regional coordinator is a responsibility to promote the regional member countries to take a more active part in the development of Codex standards. So I remembered during the last CC Asia meeting, the standard operating procedure for CC Asia was established as an information document which laid down the recommendation and procedures for the coordinator of CC Asia and the member countries, so as to promote the mutual communication and cooperation in order to facilitate active participation in the Codex work. And in addition, regional work plan for 2022 to 2024 was confirmed to implementation of Codex strategy plan. So the coordinator also has participated in the discussion on many key topics of Codex, such as the drafting of a Codex strategy plans, a future of Codex, new food systems, And comments and recommendations have been collected through email or during internal discussion within member countries. And these comments and recommendations were submitted to CC Exec and its subcommittees to facilitate the discussion. Last but not least, some regional standards developed by the CC Asia have become global Codex standards, while the distribution of the products covered by these regional standards became more global. And since the regional standard is one of the important parts of the whole Codex framework, and the work of CC Asia is therefore of great value to Codex standard work. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Ms. Jing. So thank you for giving us a great overview of the committees that are hosted in the Asian region and who are leading the development of food safety standard in particular areas. And indeed, one of the pioneering regional standards that was set up by CC Asia was one on street food. And that has indeed is a model for many of the other committees who are operating. So thank you very much for that overview again. So we'll go now to Pur and just ask him again from his vast experience in the Codex Commission itself. What do you see are the challenges for low and middle income countries, including the small island developing states, to actively participate in this process? It's not an easy process. So how do you see as them being able to increase their participation and enhancing their role? Over to you.
Yes, thanks again. So I think this is a very important question, very important issues, because many countries, including countries in our region here, face several challenges to be able to actively participating in the Codex standard setting process. And there are many, I think, difficulties or challenges here, but I would like to highlight some of them in this moment. Number one, I think, is about resources. I think Dr. Sanjay highlighted very well regarding the initiative coming from a country and trying to really set the direct direction or policy direction, in this case relating to how is the country will improve or will develop their national food control system with respect to the protecting the health of consumer and also ensuring fair practices in the food trade. So I think that's very important, and that's required resources. We have heard that, for example, here, standard is very important for facilitating international trade and so on. But the problem is, in my opinion, to ensure that the standard being developed is really relevant and really in line with the national context of those many countries. Many countries need to be actively participating, and that's the key. However, participation required attending meeting, for example, conducting a scientific assessment, providing comment on draft standard, which can be resource intensive. So I think that's first thing first, one important challenge faced by many countries. The second one is also related challenge or constraint related to the expertise capacity. Again, I'm referring to what Dr. Sanjay Dave mentioned, that Codex standard is developed based on robust and sound science, meaning that for the country to be able to actively participate in the discussion, for example, scientific discussion and assessment related to the Codex standard setting process, required a specific expertise to that. And again, because the topic covered in the Codex work is very wide, so first, country need to develop their capacity in that area, and also country need to prioritize actually which work in Codex need to be in focus for their interests. I think that's a very important one. And the next challenge is actually related to the how to involve as many as a stakeholder as possible within their national government or national situation here. This, include government agencies, industrial representative, consumer group, academic, and so on. This is to ensure, again, that the standard being developed are relevant to their national condition and interests. So I think that this is the key. And in some countries, because of the national food control system, for example, has not so advanced. So how to develop communication and trying to consolidate view from as many as stakeholders is a really challenge. So I think that's some of the challenge, and obviously, especially for our region here, language probably also a challenge. As we know that as part of the UN institution, Codex use 6 languages officially. We have Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Spanish, and Russian. So obviously, this might be a challenge also for countries where these languages are not widely spoken. So we can imagine if the discussion is about the scientific matter and we need to translate that to our local language, I think that also will hinder some of the, how to hinder active participation. And especially from Pacific Island region, geographically is very remote. As of now, we have a meeting. They probably also not in the very optimum in the time. So, and also if we have to go to physical meeting, will probably cost again, logistic cost, transportation cost. I think that's some of the challenge, I think. And example provided by Dr. Sanjay, how to collaborate within the region, like India and Bangladesh, as an example, I think need to be promoted, need to be developed further, so that sharing resources and then expertise related to the area can be developed. So I think that's one of the avenue that can be pursued as how to improve the active participation of the region. Dr. Sharmapuri, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Guru. I think you put that in very good perspective, the challenges that are faced by countries, both in terms of resources, in terms of access to science, data generation capabilities, and then, of course, also some of the other factors such as language. So it is not an easy process to consistently participate in, but then that's where all the agencies like FAO, WHO come in to build these capacities, and that's what we all try our best to do, and we shall continue to do so. So let's move then to Atul in Nepal. So after hearing that, Atul, and you are obviously from a developing country, so as a member, how do you manage to play such an active role in the FAO and WHO committees? You play an active role on the Committee of Nutrition and Food for Special Dietary Uses. So how do you see that unfolding for you? Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dharmapuri, for this brilliant question. In fact, yes, Codex, I think Dr. Puri really mentioned it's quite a mammoth task, and Dave sir also said in his keynote speech that setting a standard is a pretty mammoth task. It's not just like people coming and just sitting there and deciding, okay, this will be the amount of protein, this is the amount of calcium, and so on. No, that's not the case. It has lots of data involved, large amount of different types of scientists generating data and then compiling it. And again, countries have their own interest, they have their own limitations, they have their own regulations, sovereignty, and all those things. So there's multi factors are involved there. And as a participant of Codex Committee on Nutrition and Food for Special Dietary since 2016, what I have seen is the beauty of Codex standard is the consensus. That is why it might take sometimes quite long to get a standard done. But at the end of the day, all the member states are happy with what the standards are being developed. So, and these standards is also benchmark, for especially for developing country like us, like for country like Nepal. So when we say that we need to harmonize to Codex standards, so what I have been suggesting to the authority, the Codex committee in Nepal, is that why don't we start proposing to the Codex that we need these kind of standards, and then Nepal would then propose that and then start talking with other member states. Like say, for example, at the Asia level, at CC Asia level, we can start talking with them and discussing with them. It's not a one or 2 year task. It will take a long time, but the unfolding is in such a way that Dr. Dharma Puri and all the listeners, it's quite fascinating. And I remember in 2023 March, we had this meeting on nutrition, and then we finally got the standard for formula milk. And then people were asking us, what was your reaction to that? And I said it was amazing, and the voice of the voiceless have been heard. So this is how developing countries can play significant role while setting standards. It is really challenging. Also, we do need lots of homework to be done at home, in the office. Not just go to the Codex committee meetings and start scratching your brain. Start from the country itself. Start working here, and then take those information, and of course start talking with other member states who have similar type of thoughts and beliefs on the standard setting procedures. I think it was quite fascinating to be a part of committee meetings in Codex. That's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Upadhyay. Indeed, that was a very fascinating analysis of the work that goes on into developing a food standard. And indeed, those of the audience and those who are on the panel who have participated in standard setting, have been on committees, have attended, would know that most of the work actually happens before the meeting actually takes place. And when these documents are being presented and when the data is being talked about and analyzed, a lot of work now happens electronically through electronic working groups. That's where the bulk of the discussion actually takes place. And that's where everybody needs to be prepared, and every country needs to send its best people, its best scientists, its best risk assessors, people who actually know what the contaminants are and what kind of standards should a country be realistically be setting for itself. And therefore, that's what the proposal they should be making in these committees as well. So that actually gives you a very nice window into the process and what developing countries and smaller countries, what are the situations that they face. So thank you for that excellent piece of analysis. So we'll then, again, taking that into context, we go to the Pacific again, and we'll again now talk to Mr. Vimal Dev about this. So they are the Pacific and all the islands of the Pacific, and of course Fiji as well, is part of the Codex Committee for North America and the Southwest Pacific, also known as NASWAP. And the members of this committee are the Pacific Islands, and the other countries are rich, high-income countries, which includes the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. So, Mr. Dev, how do you handle this situation? What are the common discussions, and also what are the discussions which don't have anything in common? Maybe you can tell us about that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think you've rightly said that we are a rather diverse region with countries which are quite mature, with highly developed countries such as the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And compared to the 10 small island countries, small but populated, quite heavily populated as well. But even looking at the population numbers, we have got, say, for Papua New Guinea, which has almost 7 million people, and some of the Pacific Island countries, which may just have a population of around 10,000 people that are living on the island. So just to put that in context, that there are different challenges and different expectations around food standards. And in my earlier response, I had actually said that much of our issues that we deal with when we talk about standards may be to do with looking at monitoring and looking at having checks and balances for any imports that we're getting, making sure that we technically don't become a dumping ground for any of food products that may be at a lower standard or may not be fit for human consumption. And one of the things that, as you've asked, is the challenge, of course, is that each of these countries has a different level of internal mechanisms to actually look at standards, monitoring, and application. We look up to our bigger brothers and sisters, particularly the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, and closer within the Pacific, at least Australia and New Zealand standards and their committee meetings and the internal mechanisms to actually look at driving much of these things. And we, from the Pacific context, we look at largely because of our trading responsibilities, we look at overseas market access and what the country perspectives or expectations are. So one of the ways that we look at is making sure that if it is a particular commodity that we are targeting, whether for export purposes, we are making sure that we adhere to countries' expectation and apply appropriate standards accordingly. I must mention that at the same time, we are also now evolving to look at our domestic food products and the richness that we have within the Pacific context. In 2020, we finally got an approval for our kava standard, for kava beverage standard, which is not only unique to the Pacific, but now consumed across the globe as a leisure drink. At the last meeting that we had, and Fiji currently is the regional coordinator for the North America and the Southwest Pacific Committee, and we hosted this meeting here in Fiji, and we discussed that there are some items that we'd like to have standards developed. For instance, for breadfruit flour, we have fermented noni juice that some of the countries are actually fond of producing, and we would like those standards to be established for that. We have got also a particular interest within, because we are surrounded by oceans, a particular interest to explore around fish and fisheries products and go beyond the code of practice that currently sits with Codex. So these are some things that we wish to explore, and really looking at traditional foods and how now these traditional foods are hitting overseas markets, and the expectation from each of the country would be to meet the highest level of standards so that safety, food safety concerns are addressed, as well as that we are meeting the trade requirements, and also to ensure that the country's reputation in terms of trade is protected. So it is a complex issue when we deal with countries that are scattered across, but rightly pointed out that in this day and age, with a lot of digital footprint, with Zooms, emails, and there's a lot of virtual meetings that we are able to contribute. So we don't necessarily need to travel, but have discussions around this. So, and I must point out, I apologize, I must point out that our Ministry of Agriculture is actually the chair for the Codex Committee in Fiji. And we use them a lot with a linkage and using a One Health approach. So looking at animal and human health components and sort of tying the knot around this when we're looking at food safety and food standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Visudev. And again, that was a very fascinating overview of what happens within NASWAP. And as he said, it has made some very significant advances over the last few years, adopting the standard for kava, and then now advancing with its negotiations on noni juice. And again, it is not an easy task because the Pacific countries have to convince the richer countries on some of these aspects, and they have to provide the data for it too. But then this is what Codex is about, because all the other countries cooperate and collaborate and try to help the smaller countries with providing this data and what the analysis that helps them to advance the standard further. So this is indeed always an example of international cooperation. So for the final question in this round, let me go to again to Ruli Prayoga. And this time now ask him more about, again, farm animal standards that are implemented and followed in East Asia, where he's done most of his work. So what are these standards, and which are the ones that you disseminate? And how do you find the adoption? Do farmers or livestock, those who raise livestock, do they actually easily adopt them? Or do you face certain challenges in convincing them to do that? So over to you, Mr. Prayoga.
Thank you, Dr. Dharmapuri. Yes, in regards in the region, we already have the WHOA, or World Health Animals, or formerly OIE, that already developed regional animal welfare standards already, and it's related to the One Health approach between the human health and animal health. And actually that's drive to the food safety issues in the regions also. Unfortunately, as other colleagues already explained, that in the region there's a really diverse of country itself, about resources, about the on the implementations that have diverse. But I will be trying to reference to World Animal Protection Index in the region, that shows in the region itself, in East Asia particularly, we only have India and Malaysia, which is graded as C. Yes, I think it's only two of them that already implement mostly the farm animal welfare standard in place. And unfortunately, my country, Indonesia, is in the level E, means that there's still many requirements that to be met, and these requirements regarding to the policy, to the monitoring, surveillance, and also the standard itself, the farm animal standard itself. This is really important that the literacy in the region is really low, particularly the literacy of the One Health approach that related to the food safety issues. When you're talking about the how farmer will adopt this, mostly we have to in Indonesia we have two types of farmers. First is contract farmers who really related to the integrators, to the big company, and then second is a community farmer. So I think the most important thing here that to have a really strong collaboration between government and also the integrators to really ensure the animal welfare standard is being implemented, as well as the food safety standard. So in Indonesia, we have the NKP, the number of control veterinarians, which is become a bridge of the standard from the farm to the fork. So this standard is really addressing the slaughters, standard transport that's really related to the farm animal welfare. I just want to make some addition notes here that in the discussion, we talking about the scientists, we're talking about the regulators, we're talking about the academicians, but with not less, we're talking about the consumers group here. This is really important that we have to shift our paradigms that consumers is only the end user here. We have to really know that the consumers is the really important stakeholders. So I mean, in the regulations, both in the Codex or in other regulations, that we have to put the consumers as part of the important key stakeholder who's sitting there, or I call it like a consumers control, we can maybe a consumers group represent as consumers there to monitor and upholding the standard itself. I mean, standard can be good in the documents, but always fail in the implementations. And I think the role of the consumers here is really significant to make it happen. Thank you, Dr. Dharmapuri. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Prayogo, and thank you for emphasizing the role of the consumer. Indeed, that's something we should never, ever downplay. They are the most critical factor, and that's what all of food safety is for. So, distinguished panelists, we have almost reached the end of the panel discussion. I won't ask you any more questions, but I will now just request each one of you, and Mr. Dave, I'll ask you to the same. Can you, each one of you, please give me one take-home message on World Food Safety Day to all the listeners? What would you tell all of them today? And just to remind everybody, World Food Safety Day is on June 7th. We are observing it today so that then we can all participate in all the programs on June 7th. So can we just start off with a very quick message from each one of you? So maybe first over to Ms. Jing in China.
Okay, thank you. I think food standards itself is a certain professional, and the public should get more direct, simple information converted from the standard. And this is very important of risk communication. What I want to say to the public is to focus on food safety standards. That is to focus on your own health. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jing. So, Pur, what would you tell everyone?
Thank you. Yeah, I just would like to highlight that, especially food safety standard. Safety is the most important thing. First thing first, we have to make sure that food we consume is safe. So I like to stress the importance of safety as a prerequisite of the food itself. So everybody who has a business in the area of food, from farm to table, has to realize that and then responsibly apply the standard to ensure that food they handle and they produce and finally will be consumed by consumer are safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Atul, over to you.
Thank you. I would just like to say that let's celebrate World Food Safety Day with honor and pride. And to consumers, general public, I would say that every packaged food that you buy from the market, ensure that it is safe. And that could be done if you see any logo or a number of your authority, safety authority. Thank you.
Thank you. And then in the Pacific, Vimal, what would you say?
Thank you. I'd probably just say that food standards and particularly so food safety plays a crucial role in consumer protection and safety. It's linked to foodborne diseases and prevention issues. And particularly so coming from a health background, it plays an important role in the public health domain. Not only at a local level, internationally, regionally, it plays an important part. So very much that food standards actually do save lives. Thank you.
Indeed, they do. Thank you, Mr. Dev. And then finally, Ruli, what will be your message to everyone?
Thank you. So let us reaffirm our commitment to ensure food safety, fostering sustainable business model. This is really important, and protecting consumers. I think by working together, we can build a future where safe and nutritious food is a basic human right, not a privilege. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Ruli. And finally, Mr. Dave, can I ask you for a message? You started this conversation. Maybe you can you can finish it too.
A very useful message for all the regulators, the food industry, and the consumers is to keep interacting with each other and please advise where there are deficiencies. Make all efforts to keep improving the standards, the implementation, and awareness about food safety. In very brief.
Thank you, Mr. Dave, and thank you all panelists for a great discussion. Let me just say, everyone stood online and everybody has been stayed online to hear from you. It's been very, very fascinating and a learning experience for all. So thank you all very much for being here today. And it's now my pleasure to hand over to my colleague, the technical officer in the World Health Organization in Manila, Dr. Jessica Kaimori Lopez, who will now give a brief presentation on food systems approach towards food standards. Over to you, Jessica.
Thank you very much, Sridhar, and good moment to everybody that is connected globally, let's say. It's our pleasure to be here today and to have the chance to listen to all these great speakers from our region and also to our region. So from the WHO Regional Office for the Western Pacific, I'm here with my colleague, Mrs. Frida Esther Storacciari, also part of the food safety team here in MIPRO. And we would like to send our regards and our best wishes for your World Food Safety Day celebrations that are to come in this month of June. So before we close our webinar, I would like to bring a little bit more about the food system approach and how it correlates to food standards. And basically, once we are talking about the terminology of food system, we are referring to all this constellation of activities that are involved in the food chain. And we have heard today different stakeholders, different levels of food production, food processing, transportation, and the consumption of food. How much the food systems, they are touching every aspect of our human existence. And this might sound very deep, but if I bring another perspective to that, and also adding health, our food systems, they are directly related not only to human health, but as well as the health of our environment, the health of animals, as we heard today too, related to our economies, and also related to our cultures. And once these food systems are not functioning well, they don't have the power to bring us together as a society and also as a community. And despite the fact that we have many different stakeholders involved in the food system and in different levels, we all share one very important and common point, because we are all consumers. We are all going to be the ones consuming the food we are producing. So after that, in 2021, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres convened the Food System Summit as part of the Decade Action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, which I will be able to bring a little bit further, that needs to be achieved by 2030 in the UN agenda. So the summit basically launched new actions to deliver progress in delivering the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And each of them are relying at some degree on healthier, more sustainable and equitable food systems. So bringing together different United Nations member states and different groups all over the world, including food producers, including indigenous people, civil society, and researchers, the private sector, other United Nations agencies and partners to identify changes in the world's food system. And basically, this was also a way to reaffirm how we can promote sustainable food systems to everybody. Touching on the famous Sustainable Development Goals, we have a total of 17, and the summit itself was a historic opportunity for us to empower people to understand the importance of food systems and also to drive our recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic to get us back on track to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. The COVID-19 might not longer be considered as a public health emergency of international concern. However, it has impacted many of our nations, many of our member states worldwide, and this in a very negative way. So once we have food systems that are fragile and vulnerable to collapse, millions of peoples around the globe are prone to experience this type of challenges, same as we have faced during the COVID-19 pandemic. So in order to get food systems not to fail, these actions are being put together. So a couple of the actions that are comprised inside the food systems action tracks. So one of them is related to everyone's to have the right to have access to healthy and nutritious food. One of them is related to the sustainability of food production and the consumption patterns that we have in many different areas of the globe. We are talking about environmentally friendly systems that are acting on climate change and are addressing these major causes that are very complex to be addressed. We are referring to equitable food distribution and livelihoods, and also bringing the inclusion of a decent work condition for everybody that is involved in the food system. And we are also referring to resilient systems that are prepared to adverse effects to ensure that these systems are able to continue and to continue to sustain and feed the global population. So basically, why food system transformation is important, and for here, we will bring some aspects related to the increased food security and also addressing hunger and malnutrition all over the world, and also reducing poverty and inequality, as healthy food needs to be provided and accessible to all. We are also referring to the reduced environmental impacts and also the protection of biodiversity, as the environment is a core component of our food system, and it's also where we are, where we live, where we are, and considering the sustainability of the production practices. So we are able to address a longer term continuation. But overall, the promotion of health, as you can see in the center, and I will bring the One Health concept as we are talking about considerations for the human, animal, and environmental interface, and bringing again the highlight and attention for multi-sectoral efforts to address food safety and to include in the food system approach. So how does FAO and WHO food standards programs are related to it? So basically, when we bring FAO and WHO as technical agencies to the conversation and also relating it to food standards, the roles and actions that we have towards food systems. Apart from the technical support and also to the guidance that is provided to the member states and also different stakeholders in the whole food chain, the joint FAO and WHO food standards program convene global experts groups and also provide scientific advice to provide such support. And this supports us to contribute to building stronger evidence-based to sustain comprehensive food standards. And I believe that good part of this work was also demonstrated today by the talks that we had with the speakers. So that's exactly where Codex Alimentarius has been great in assisting the nations in moving ahead with food standards. So a couple of take-home messages. As we could observe, food system transformation is crucial to address pressing and complex challenges, and that would require, as many of us highlighted today, multi-sectoral collaboration at different levels. And it also involves various stakeholders throughout the food chain. And not only by taking collective action with all the stakeholders, we will also be able to build resilient food systems that will cope with current and future needs in our society. So foodborne diseases are there to highlight the importance of food safety. So bringing a lot of proper food handling, hygiene measures, and education, awareness about food safety, and awareness about the role of everybody towards the promotion of safer food. Food standards are at the heart of food safety. That was proven by today's speeches, and We continue to believe that food standards are a way to ensure food safety and food quality worldwide. And the harmonization of the available food standards and the creation of new food standards to cover the gaps that we still have are to provide safe food to everyone and everywhere. So with that, and just to close, the audio might not be coming up, but this is basically a happy World Food Safety Day from the temporary technical advisory group on food safety from WHO. And I will close here and revert back to my colleague, Dr. Gongol, for the closure of the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica. There was query about how Codex Alimentaris Commission works and how many Codex standards are there. So we are going to show you a video film which is developed on the 60th anniversary of the Codex Alimentaris Commission that reflects how Codex Alimentaris Commission transform international trade as well as consumer health protection. Short video we have. Thank you very much. It was very encouraging that we have a diverse perspective on food standard and food. So there was discussion not only about food, but also feed. And you can visit our Codex Alimentaris Commission website, where there are issues not only about food, also feed. And there was also issue of animal welfare, One Health, and food should not only be safe, but also healthy. So that means consumers have rights to know what they are eating, like front of package labeling for salt, sugar, and trans fat. It was very encouraging that our panelists, eminent speaker and panelists share practical thoughts, good practices, challenges, and opportunities. And it was great to know that even if you are in low and middle income country, you can play important role in Codex standard setting process and participate in discussion, because Codex standards, they are transparent, based on consensus building and inclusiveness. That is, these are the quality of those Codex standards. So establishing a food standard at the national level should indeed be a national effort based on contribution from the government, the food industry, food trade, the scientific community, and consumers. The process should be inclusive, transparent, and evidence-based in line with Codex standards, and it depends upon how functional National Codex Committee. And National Codex Committee should play an important role, and it is very important to conclude that we should be better prepared, and we should consult national stakeholders to ensure meaningful engagement in Codex standard setting process, such as physical and electronic working groups. Second important aspect which came from this webinar is harmonization of inter-country food standards in line with Codex standards is the need of the time for member states to facilitate inter-country and intra-regional food trade. Third, revitalization of regional Codex committee like Codex Committee for Asia, Codex Committee for North America, and the Southwest Pacific is increasingly important, as there is a need for greater coordination and networking among countries in the region, including active participation of member states in the Codex standard setting process of global and regional importance. Similarly, FAO and WHO, we reiterate the commitment to support member states to strengthen national food control system as per Codex standards, code of practice, guidelines, and recommendation. So on the behalf of FAO WHO, I would like to thank eminent speakers and panelists who spare their time and who are actively sharing their expertise as well as their concern and way out to solve this kind of problem. Because Codex standard setting, even national standard, it is a not easy task. And I would like to thank Sridhar, Surasak, Pampilar, Pim Chanok, Jessica, Frida, Syed, Rose, and in IT and communication team, and those who work behind the scene for successful organization of this event. Thank you very much, and we look forward meaningful celebration, observance of World Food Safety Day in your country, so that we can make aware of consumer as well as all stakeholders that food standards save lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy World Food Safety Day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Same to you.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah.